the courtroom cameras caught the exact second Richard Bennett made the decision that would change everything. Standing tall with complete confidence, he extended his hand and pointed directly at his 19-year-old daughter Emily. His face was filled with anger, but more than that, it carried the belief that he was right, that he was justified, that he was about to teach her a lesson in front of the judge and an entire audience watching from their homes. What he didn't realize was that this moment would become something entirely different. Within minutes, what seemed like a simple dispute began to transform into a powerful and deeply unsettling revelation. This was no longer about a financial disagreement. It became a story about control, about manipulation, and about a father whose authority was being challenged in the most public way possible. Richard Bennett entered that courtroom certain of his victory. At 52 he was a man who had built a life around success and control. A corporate executive who was used to having the final word. He carried himself with the confidence of someone who had rarely, if ever, been questioned. His expensive suit, his precise movements, and the leather folder in his hands all reflected a man who believed he had prepared for everything. Inside that folder he carried what he thought was undeniable proof. Documents, numbers, records all carefully organized to support his claim that his daughter owed him $15,000. In his mind, this was not just about money. This was about proving a point. About showing the world that he had done everything for his daughter, only to be repaid with disrespect. He had rehearsed this moment. He imagined the judge agreeing with him. He imagined the audience seeing him as a responsible father. He believed this case would restore control over a situation that had slipped out of his hands. But there was one thing he hadn't prepared for. For the past 2 years Emily had been quietly documenting everything, every message he sent. Every call filled with pressure, every moment where what looked like care was actually control. She didn't come into that courtroom unprepared, she came ready to reveal the truth. And the judge, someone with decades of experience dealing with families and conflict, noticed something immediately. Within seconds she recognized a pattern. She had seen it before: parents who believed control was the same as love. On the surface the case seemed simple. Richard claimed Emily owed him money for what he described as loans, a car, gifts, expenses. He had listed each one carefully, presenting them as debts that needed to be repaid. But the atmosphere in the courtroom told a different story. This wasn't about money, this was about power. Emily sat quietly, her hands trembling as she held her folder. She looked small compared to the presence of her father. But there was something else there too, something stronger than fear. She had already taken the biggest step. She had left her life from the outside had once looked perfect: good schools, opportunities, a comfortable home. But behind that image was a reality few people ever saw. Her father controlled everything: her schedule, her friendships, her choices. Every gift came with expectations. Every kind gesture carried a hidden cost. And every mistake, no matter how small, was used to remind her that she wasn't enough. As she grew older, the control only tightened. At 16 she was given a car. But it wasn't freedom, it was another way to monitor her. She was responsible for payments, rules, restrictions. It was control disguised as generosity. At 17, when she wanted to attend prom with someone her father didn't approve of, he didn't simply disagree. He threatened her future, and she stayed home alone. Everything changed when she met someone who treated her differently. Someone who listened. Someone who didn't try to control her. For the first time, she experienced what it felt like to make her own decisions. And that changed everything. When her father found out, his reaction was immediate. He tried to regain control. He demanded, pressured, threatened, and when that didn't work he cut her off. That was the moment Emily made the most difficult decision of her life. She walked away. Back in the courtroom, Richard began presenting his case with confidence. He spoke about everything he had done, everything he had provided. He framed himself as the one who had been wronged. But the judge listened carefully. Not just to his words, but to the meaning behind them. Then she asked a question that changed everything. When you gave these things to your daughter, did you clearly say they were loans? For a brief moment, Richard hesitated, and in that hesitation, the truth began to surface. He tried to explain it as an understanding. That children should know everything comes with expectations, but that answer revealed more than he intended. He didn't see gifts, he saw investments, and he expected a return. When Emily was given the chance to speak, her voice was quiet at first. But she had something stronger than confidence. She had proof. She explained that nothing had ever been presented as a loan. That everything was given freely, until she chose independence. Then, the narrative changed. She presented her evidence, Ma's records, documents. The judge began reading them aloud. Each message revealed something deeper: threats, control, statements that made it clear this wasn't about support. It was about power. The courtroom shifted, people reacted, the energy changed. Then came a moment that defined the entire case. A birthday card written by Richard himself. It clearly stated that the car was a gift. No conditions, no expectations. That single piece of evidence contradicted everything he had claimed. When questioned, he tried to justify it. He said things had changed, but the judge didn't accept that. A gift is a gift, it doesn't become a loan because someone is angry. As more evidence came forward, the truth became undeniable. Emily had been making the payments, the car was in her name, there was no agreement, no debt, only control. Then Richard made the mistake that would define everything. He stood up, raised his voice, and in that moment he revealed exactly who he was. He spoke about authority, about rights, about ownership, but instead of strengthening his case, he destroyed it. The courtroom reacted immediately, the judge's expression changed, and what followed was more than a decision, it was a complete dismantling of everything he believed. She explained clearly that parenting is not a transaction, that providing for a child does not create a debt, that love is not something that can be turned into control. Then she delivered the ruling, the case was dismissed, completely, the car belonged to Emily, and she was awarded compensation for the emotional distress she had endured. Richard had entered that courtroom expecting to prove his point. Instead, he left exposed publicly, completely. The impact spread quickly beyond the courtroom. Millions watched, people shared the story, conversations began, about control, about boundaries, about what parenting truly means. For many, it was more than just a case, it was validation. It was recognition, it was understanding. Richard's life began to change in ways he hadn't expected. His image, carefully built over years, started to collapse, but for Emily everything changed differently. She found support, she found freedom, she continued building her life on her own terms. And for the first time, she understood something important, that she didn't need permission to live her life, that what she had experienced wasn't love, it was control, and that walking away wasn't weakness, it was strength. In the end, this wasn't just a courtroom case, it was a message. That control is not care, that respect cannot be forced, and that no one has the right to treat another person as something they own, because when the truth finally comes out, it doesn't just expose what's hidden, it changes everything.